Hi, I'm Vesper. They used to call me the golden child, until I walked away from what they wanted and built something they couldn't understand. Now, I'm the disappointment they don't invite into group photos, the sister who wasn't bridesmaid material, the daughter whose name they quietly leave off every family update. But then, at my sister's engagement party, her fiancé turned to me and asked, "You're the founder." And for the first time, the room got quiet. What did he see that my own family refused to? And why did it take a stranger to finally make me feel visible? Let me tell you what really happened. We were 15 minutes into dinner when it started. The slow suffocation I'd grown used to over the years. A white linen tablecloth, a roast that smelled like expectations, and my sister glowing in the warm light of my mother's praise. "So, Sable," my father began, wine glass in hand, "how's the new firm treating you? I heard the Chicago office is already trying to poach you." She gave that polished laugh she's mastered since law school, then nodded toward her fiancé across the table. "Busy, but good. We're handling the new estate accounts for a few family foundations, some legacy stuff. High pressure, but I love it." There was a brief pause, and then the inevitable pivot. "And Vesper?" My mom's voice followed too quickly, too light. "You're still doing your computer thing?" I looked up. She wasn't asking. She was filling in the blank for everyone else. "I run a digital literacy platform for older adults. It's called Elder Guide. We partner with libraries and senior homes." "That's sweet," she cut in, nodding like I'd said I volunteer at a soup kitchen once a month. She's always been creative, a free spirit. Free spirit. That was the code. Family shorthand for the one who didn't follow the plan. And suddenly, I was 13 again, at the parent-teacher conference, where my mom told the math teacher, "She's not really a numbers kid, but she has a good heart." The conversation moved on. I went quiet, cut my salmon like it had insulted me. I didn't say anything as my father bragged about Sable's networking event with the mayor's office, or when he said her name like it had more syllables than mine. I just counted my chews and tried not to disappear. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table, the glow of my laptop the only light in the apartment. I opened my email, not expecting much. A subject line caught my eye. "Your app helped my dad FaceTime me. First time he's smiled since Mom died." I clicked the video. A silver-haired man looked into the screen, blinking awkwardly, and then broke into the widest grin when his daughter's face appeared. The woman filming sniffled, whispered thank you, and said, "He thought he'd never see me again. You brought him back to us." I watched it twice. Then again. And then I opened my inbox and found another email. From my mom. Group message. Subject, Holiday Family Update. It started with a paragraph about Sable's new position and Cassian's promotion in New York. Then a few lines about cousin Luke proposing. Even Grandma's new knitting hobby got a sentence. I searched for my name. Nothing. Not even a mention of me living in Portland. Or existing. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I closed the tab and muttered, "It's like I've been cut out of the story." In the mirror later, I stared at my own face and said it aloud. I gave dignity to strangers. My own family won't even put my name in a newsletter. There was no rage, just stillness. A quiet understanding that they hadn't forgotten me. They'd chosen not to see me. 6 days later, we were at another family gathering. Bigger this time. Catered. Cloth napkins folded like swans. I wore dark green because my mother always said jewel tones, wash me out. I didn't care. As Sable arrived, guests stood to clap. My father beamed like he'd trained her for a prize fight. My mom leaned into her friend's ear and said, "That's our girl, always so put together." When someone asked what I did, my mother chuckled and said, "Vesper's our creative spirit. She dabbles in tech, fun stuff." Not a word about the thousands of seniors who'd learned to send their first email because of me. Not a mention of the state-funded grants or the pilot program in rural libraries. Just a smile, like I was a child showing off a macaroni sculpture. Later, my father leaned over to me, the smell of whiskey soft in his breath. "Just don't go too far off the rails, all right?" he said, trying to sound amused, like it was a joke. I smiled, small and tight. But that night, I didn't cry. I didn't break something or write a long, angry post. I just opened a new folder on my desktop, titled it Proof. And for the first time, I started saving everything. After I saved that folder, I stared at the screen a little longer than I needed to. The light from the monitor was the only thing illuminating the kitchen. I didn't move for a while, just sat there, listening to the silence as if it might say something useful. It didn't. The following Saturday, I found myself at a lunch I didn't ask to attend, hosted by my mother at a country club that still had a dress code posted in its lobby. Blazers for men, no denim, and definitely no room for daughters like me. We were seated under a pergola draped in faux ivy, with a table of perfectly chilled sparkling water and wedges of lemon that had clearly never touched human hands. Margaret from church was there, along with Henry, one of my mom's old coworkers from her teaching days. Sable, of course, arrived looking like an ad for bridal magazines. White linen dress, pearls, and a smile so tightly managed I wondered how her jaw didn't lock. Mom was in full PR mode, every sentence polished, rehearsed. "Sable's been juggling so much," she said, pouring more iced tea into Margaret's glass. "Between work and the wedding, I don't know how she does it. And Cassian, he's just a rock. Such a stable man. Comes from a good family. Ivy League, you know." Margaret leaned in, eyes soft with that curious kindness older women use like a blade. "And what about Vesper?" My mother didn't miss a beat. She gave a sweet, almost apologetic chuckle. "Oh, you know Vesper. She's still finding her path. Creative type. We never wanted to pressure her. But Sable..." She turned to look at my sister, pride radiating from every pore. "Sable's always been the one who knew what she wanted." No one said anything cruel, but that's the genius of it. Nobody had to. I chewed my salad slowly and smiled when people made eye contact. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't mention the latest city library system that had just signed with Elder Guide. I didn't bring up the new grant. I didn't say a word. Because in rooms like that, silence is what keeps the peace, and what keeps you small. That evening, back home, I opened a new submission in the Elder Guide testimonial portal. The thumbnail was blurry, but I clicked anyway. A woman, late 70s maybe, looked into the screen with cautious eyes. "My husband, he has early memory issues," she said. "Couldn't remember how to unlock his phone last week. But today, he called our granddaughter, on his own. You didn't just give him tech, you gave him back a piece of his mind." I didn't cry. I smiled, but it wasn't a full smile, just enough to remind myself I hadn't imagined my worth. Then I closed the laptop and stood there, in the stillness of my apartment, realizing something hard but honest. I was building something for strangers that my own family didn't even care to ask about. The following week, my mother insisted I attend a charity brunch Sable was organizing. "It would be good for people to see you both together," she said over the phone. I bit my tongue, said I'd come. The venue was sleek downtown, the kind of place where people donated to causes because they'd already maxed out their vacation homes. Cassian was there too, networking with someone in finance. I caught his eye, nodded. He smiled back politely, distracted. I stood near the buffet, trying to decide if I cared enough to eat, when I heard my mother's voice, just a few feet away. "She's been running point on this whole thing," Marla told a potential donor, motioning to Sable. "The digital side? That's her too. Honestly, Sable handles real clients. Vesper's more freelance. Creative type. It's sweet. Sweet. It wasn't even the word that got me. It was the tone. That careful pat-on-the-head tone people use when they describe a hobby you'll grow out of. As if my work were some elaborate Etsy project instead of the infrastructure keeping half their event functioning. I pulled out the checkbook I'd been holding and filled out the payment for the donation software license that the event had run on. my software. No one noticed. No one asked. Later, as I was leaving, I passed by a group of donors clapping for Sable. Someone raised their glass and said, "You've really modernized the whole process. Seamless." She didn't say a word, just smiled, tilted her head, let them believe whatever they wanted. I didn't call her out, not yet, but something shifted inside me, a slow click, like the first notch in a lock being undone. So this is how they do it, I thought. Silence breeds spotlight. The room hadn't emptied yet, but I was already halfway gone. My legs moved on autopilot, weaving through clusters of guests still sipping champagne and trading praise like currency. I kept my head high, even as my chest burned with the familiar friction of being overlooked. Again. By the time I reached the valet line, the sky had shifted from lavender to deep blue. I stood under one of the overhead heaters, my breath barely visible in the air, my fingers curled tightly around the USB drive now tucked into my purse. A bartender stepped outside to take a smoke break and offered me a nod. I returned it without smiling. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was watching. 3 nights later, I was back at Varelli's rooftop garden. But this time, it was for the big one. Sable and Cassian's formal engagement party. The kind of event with photographers, signature cocktails, and table assignments printed in calligraphy. I'd offered to help with the digital RSVPs. And, shock of all shocks, my software had been used without hesitation. No one mentioned that I'd built the backend or optimized the guest interface. That credit had evaporated like mist. Inside, the space was immaculate. Golden hour light poured in through floor-to-ceiling windows, catching on sequins, cufflinks, and teeth. The slideshow began just after the first round of speeches. Cassian's brother tapped the mic, said a few kind words, and then the screen flickered to life behind him. I recognized the transition style. It was mine. Clean fades, large font, subtle motion blur. Slides rolled past. Childhood photos, a vacation montage, snippets from their proposal video in Tahoe. And then came a flash. Me, blurry, seated at my desk with headphones on. It wasn't even a full second. Just enough to catch my silhouette before it jumped to a photo of Sable and Cassian, kissing at the top of a trailhead with a caption that read, "Built on love, trust, and shared vision." A woman seated next to me leaned in. "Were you one of the interns? That tech slide looked cool." I blinked once. "Something like that." She nodded, sipped her drink, and turned her attention back to the screen. The moment passed without weight, for her. I didn't say a word, just watched, absorbing the reality that I had somehow become a footnote in the story I helped construct. About 20 minutes later, I noticed an issue with the HDMI connection at the media station. The screen had briefly glitched during the video, and the tech staff seemed flustered. I made my way to the side console, quietly, smoothly, like I'd done at 100 other events. I reached into my tote and pulled out an extra cable from my kit. I was crouched down, checking the signal stabilizer, when a man in a navy sport coat approached from behind. He held out an empty glass with a practiced half smile. "Hey, could you get more wine? Or maybe pass this to the servers?" I didn't flinch, just took the glass, placed it on a nearby tray, and went back to the cable without saying a word. He walked off without a second glance. When I stood up, I adjusted my jacket and returned to my seat. My hands were steady, my face was composed. But inside, a part of me had gone colder than before, settled into a kind of silent clarity. It wasn't that I wasn't welcome. It was that I didn't exist. The final round of toasts started just before dessert. Cassian stepped up to the microphone, relaxed and eloquent. He thanked his parents, his brother, and Sable for her flawless event coordination. He thanked the venue, the photographer, even the valet team. And then he said this, "And, of course, I want to thank the whole Darnell Quince family for making tonight possible." He looked around the room with a warm smile. His gaze passed over me like I was another decorative sconce on the wall. He meant it kindly. He didn't know what he'd done. But that was the part that cut deepest. He didn't know, because no one had told him. They'd erased me from the narrative so thoroughly that even someone I'd worked with indirectly, who'd seen my name on digital contracts, didn't connect it to my face. It wasn't malice, it was routine. As people clapped and the crowd shifted toward the dessert station, I quietly made my way back to the side table where I'd stashed my laptop. I unplugged the HDMI cord I'd lent. I closed the open window on the tech console. Then, I opened my laptop and renamed the backup folder I'd made for this event. It was no longer Event Support. I changed it to Proof. Then I slipped the USB into my purse and zipped it closed. I wasn't going to use it, not yet. But if they kept pretending I wasn't there, the day would come. The valet handed me my keys with a smile that felt too polite, like he knew I hadn't belonged at that party either. I drove home with the windows down, even though the night air had cooled. I needed something real on my skin, anything to remind me I hadn't imagined the whole thing. The next morning, the silence in my apartment was heavier than usual. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, staring at the group message from Sable titled, Bridal Party, Final Confirmations. The names were all there. College roommates, Cassian's sister, a former coworker from New York. Not mine. I scrolled up. Nothing had been missed. I wasn't forgotten. I was left out. About an hour later, a new message pinged in. This time, directly from my mother. Honey, you know you're just a bit different. Sable wanted everything to look coordinated. It wasn't cruel. That was the part that made it burn longer. It was concern dressed up in control. She didn't say I wasn't wanted. She said I wouldn't fit. I didn't respond. I closed the message and stood, walking barefoot to the kitchen. As the coffee brewed, I watched the steam curl into the morning light. They had made the decision weeks ago. The dresses were already ordered. The photos planned. The seating chart printed. They hadn't even bothered to ask. 3 days later, I found a dress I thought might work anyway. Dark green satin, clean lines, ankle length. Something classic but not loud. I tried it on at home, snapped a mirror photo in decent light, and sent it to the group chat, just to see. Hours passed. Nothing. That evening, as I was closing my laptop, a reply finally came in. From Sable. It's lovely. Maybe keep that for another event? Short, polite, final. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before turning it off. I wasn't surprised, but I was done pretending I hadn't noticed. Later that night, as I folded the dress back into its bag, I realized they'd already chosen a color scheme. I was never part of the planning. I was just the last to get the message. That same night, around 11:12 p.m., my father sent a text. No greeting, no punctuation. Please don't bring up work at the reception. It's not the time. Just that. I read it once. Then again. Then one more time for reasons I can't explain. I didn't reply. I didn't save it either. I deleted it, not out of peace, but because I refused to give it permanence. There was a slow shift happening inside me, like bricks quietly being pulled from a wall. Each message, each omission, each carefully crafted concern was hollowing out a space that used to ache. I'd stopped being surprised. Now I was simply documenting. The next morning, I opened the folder on my USB again and renamed it one more time. Contingency. Because I didn't want a confrontation. But if it came, I wanted to be ready. And this time, if they painted me as the unstable one, the emotional one, the misfit, I'd have the timeline. I'd have the receipts. I'd have the version of the story they couldn't overwrite. I poured myself a glass of water, walked to the window, and let the early sun hit my face. From the outside, it would still look like I was playing along, showing up, smiling, wearing whatever color they allowed me to wear. But inside, I was done asking to be included. I wasn't waiting for an invitation anymore. I was writing my own list. It was strange how little it took to break a pattern once you stopped fearing the fallout. A few nights after renaming the folder on my drive, I walked into a corner cafe 2 blocks from my apartment. The kind with mismatched mugs, fake plants, and no tolerance for people who sat too long without ordering a second drink. I just needed to breathe, but I wasn't alone. My mother's voice caught my ear before I even reached the counter. She was seated by the window with a woman I didn't recognize. Blonde bob, wedding band, expensive watch, the type who marries into money and learns how to smile with her jaw clenched. "I adore Vesper," Mom was saying. "She's brilliant, just not very stable. You know how some people just don't adjust well to structured environments. Not everyone's built for real-world pressure." It was delivered with the polish of someone who's said it before, too many times. I didn't hesitate. I walked up to the barista, ordered a black coffee, then turned toward their table and said, evenly but clearly, "Hi, Mom." The other woman blinked. My mother's smile froze. "Oh, Vesper, we were just talking about my mental fitness?" I asked. No smile, just eye contact. Mom laughed. "Oh, honey, don't be so dramatic. We were talking about how creative you are. Weren't we, Julia?" Julia nodded with that sympathetic tightness that said she didn't want to be involved. I took my coffee, thanked the barista, and left. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. The next morning, I mailed something small, a care package. Nothing fancy, just a simple tablet, loaded with Elder Guide's most basic interface, plus instructions written in large font with step-by-step photos. The recipient was Cassian's great-aunt, who had been mentioned once in passing. Lives alone, trouble with vision, couldn't figure out video calls. She got the box 4 days later. 2 weeks after that, at another brunch, I overheard Sable telling someone, "Cassian's team is so thoughtful. They sent something for Aunt Myra. She's using it already. Can you believe that?" I didn't flinch. I didn't interrupt. That night, I saved the voicemail Aunt Myra left. Her voice wavered between laughter and awe. "I called my granddaughter today. I didn't think I'd ever get to see her again. I thought that part of life was over." I uploaded the audio into my encrypted folder, then labeled it Proof Personal. I wasn't hoarding evidence for revenge. I was collecting reality, for when the lies got too thick to cut through with words alone. And I was done letting them speak over me. A week passed without another incident, but then came a text from my mother. "Just a reminder, don't wear green to the gala. The bridesmaids are in navy, and we want everything cohesive. Not please, not thank you, just a command." I stared at the message for a few seconds, then placed the phone face down on the counter. That evening, I picked it back up and made the call I had been avoiding. She answered on the third ring. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, like nothing had happened. "What's up?" "I need you to hear this clearly," I said. "I'm done being polite about it. The next time you minimize what I've built, the next time you call me unstable or refer to my work like it's a hobby, I will make sure the truth is public." There was silence on the line. She tried to chuckle. "Vesper, come on! No one's minimizing you. You're just sensitive. You always were." "I'm not asking you to fix it," I said. "I'm telling you to stop." Another pause. Then, "You wouldn't want to embarrass the family." "No," I replied, "but I won't let you keep erasing me to protect it." I ended the call without waiting for her response. The next morning, I pulled the engagement invitation from the stack of unread mail by the door. Heavy cardstock, gold foil lettering, one of those cream-colored envelopes that already felt sticky with expectation. I set it on the kitchen table, poured myself a cup of coffee, and stared at it until the sun shifted in the window. Then I picked up a pen. On the RSVP line, I wrote, "Attending with clarity." I folded it neatly, slid it back into the envelope, sealed it shut, and placed it in the outgoing tray. This wasn't about showing up. It was about being seen. The envelope was already gone, dropped in the outgoing slot at the post office before I could second-guess it. The act felt clean, not defiant, not theatrical, just final. That evening, the venue buzzed with last-minute activity. I arrived early, not to make a statement, but because I'd helped prep the tech and knew exactly how thin the margins were for things going wrong. The catering team was still setting up when I entered through the back corridor. The floral team was running behind, so I stepped around bouquets and table cards. My name wasn't on any of them. The program was laid out on a display table near the entrance. Thick paper, gold-trimmed, folded in thirds. Inside was a detailed rundown: ceremony schedule, dinner courses, acknowledgements. Sable's name appeared twice, once under Event Coordinator, once again under Special Thanks. Elder Guide made the list, credited vaguely. Tech support provided by the Holt Darnell team. That used to be my line. They kept the system, stripped the name. I didn't tear the program in half. I didn't even take one. I just walked past it like it didn't matter. But the weight of that line sat in my chest like wet sand. About 20 minutes later, as the guests were ushered into the main hall, Cassian and Sable made their grand entrance. The room clapped. Phones went up. Someone whistled. It looked effortless, which I suppose was the goal. Cassian took the mic. He thanked everyone graciously, and when he mentioned the hybrid setup for guests who couldn't travel, people nodded appreciatively. "We had incredible tech support," he said, "which made it possible for some of our more seasoned loved ones to be here virtually tonight." Sable smiled. The perfect host. She didn't say a word. Didn't flinch. Didn't correct. A guest at my table, a woman in her late 50s wearing pearls and a soft gray dress, leaned toward me and asked, "That system was incredible. Did you help with it too?" I didn't hesitate. "It came from my laptop." She blinked, taken aback, then smiled with an awkward little nod. "Well, it worked beautifully." I nodded once and turned my gaze back to the stage. That was enough. Later, as the crowd shifted for the dinner service, I stepped quietly toward the bar. One of the photographers, Deshaun, someone I'd worked with during a nonprofit rollout in Salem, was reviewing footage on his camera. We exchanged a look. I handed him a USB from my clutch. "What's this?" he asked. "Design files, interface prototypes, time-stamped source code, a short UI walkthrough." I paused. "Contracts, too." He raised an eyebrow, then glanced down at the drive. "Need me to use this tonight?" I smiled. "Only if someone tries to say they built it." He chuckled under his breath. "Say no more." I returned to my seat and waited. Not for drama, just for the inevitable. By the time dessert was cleared, the slideshow had started looping again for late guests. I hadn't touched it, hadn't sent in anything, but someone had. There, about 4 minutes into the loop, between a clip of Cassian's niece blowing bubbles and Sable adjusting her veil in the mirror, was a brief demo video. The beta version of Elder Guide's UI. It was me, on camera, narrating the design walkthrough for potential donors. My voice, my layout, my name in the corner of the screen. It lasted 28 seconds. When it ended, the room didn't gasp. No one dropped their forks, but heads turned. Eyes glanced in my direction. The kind of silence that didn't demand an answer, only acknowledgement. Sable didn't react. She kept her smile plastered on, but I saw the flicker in her eyes when she caught my gaze. My mother shifted in her seat, but said nothing. Cassian glanced over, looked curious, but not concerned. I didn't stand up, didn't explain. I didn't need to. The moment spoke for itself. Later, as guests filtered out, a younger woman, maybe one of Cassian's cousins, passed by my chair and said quietly, "I saw that slide. That was you, right?" I nodded. She smiled. "Good. I was hoping it was." The reception was thinning out, but not quieting. People lingered by the bar, clinking glasses and repeating the same compliments in rotation. My name wasn't among them, and I didn't expect it to be, but something had shifted. There was a low murmur now, curiosity, not recognition, the kind that makes people watch you out of the corner of their eye. Near the back of the venue, where the lights dimmed just enough for conversations to feel private, I saw Cassian's aunt holding up her phone. She was showing him a video, her brows lifted with emotion. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I recognized the format of the testimonial instantly. Elder Guide. The short clip ended with a sentence I'd read more times than I could count in the past year. Thank you, Vesper. You gave us more than tech. You gave us back Sunday mornings. I knew that line. I'd cried the first time I read it. I'd saved it in the folder titled Reminder, back when I still needed one. Cassian froze for a moment, staring at the screen. Then he looked up, searching the room. His eyes landed on me. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. But the calculation in his face was unmistakable. Pieces rearranging, stories contradicting themselves. It didn't take long. 10 minutes later, I stepped out onto the terrace for some air. The night was cool, the breeze steady. He found me there. I didn't know, he said. I turned toward him. About what? The system, Elder Guide, that it was yours. I let the silence speak longer than he probably liked. Then, you never asked. Sable said it came from a team she worked with in the city. Said it was just plug and play. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't think it was strange she couldn't explain how it worked. She said she coordinated the tech, but I never saw her log into anything. His tone shifted, less defensive now, more unsettled. You didn't think I'd find out? He asked, but the question wasn't sharp. It was almost tired. I figured you might, I said. Eventually. He leaned back against the railing, processing. It's not just a tech platform. It changed my family. My grandmother, she died last spring. But before that, she called us every week. She used to smile again. His voice cracked slightly. I didn't respond. There was nothing to add. The truth had already done its work. Inside, the band struck up a new song. Someone tapped a mic. The energy shifted again. People migrating back into the main hall. We followed, not walking together, but near enough. Cassian stepped onto the platform, where the final toast of the night was supposed to take place. I returned to my seat and watched. He cleared his throat. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, for supporting us, for celebrating with us, for showing up. He paused. His gaze skimmed the room, then settled directly on me. Some of you may not know this, but Elder Guide, the platform that allowed my grandmother to video call our family every Sunday before she passed, was built by someone in this room. Not by a tech firm, not by a vendor, but by Vesper Lane. My body didn't move, but every cell in it listened. The air in the room changed. Not dramatically. There were no gasps or applause. Just a shift. My mother's fork tapped against her plate. Sable stared straight ahead, her hands clasped like she was praying for the moment to pass. Cassian didn't say more. He lifted his glass. To building things that matter, and the people brave enough to build them. There was a pause. Then scattered clinks. A few guests lifted their glasses out of politeness. Some looked around, unsure. I didn't raise mine. Not because I was being petty, but because for the first time in a very long while, I didn't need to be part of their performance. I didn't need a mic. I didn't need a title. They heard it. They knew. After the toast, people resumed moving. Less buzzed now, more thoughtful. A few glanced in my direction, with a different expression than earlier. Not pity, not confusion, recognition. Near the dessert table, Sable approached. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. You could have said something earlier, she said, soft enough that no one nearby would hear. I did, I replied. You just weren't listening. I was trying to keep it simple, clean. No, I corrected. You were trying to keep it creditable, for you. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For once, she had nothing clever to add. I walked away before she could find the words. Back near my seat, a girl maybe in her 20s touched my elbow gently. I turned. She looked like Cassian, probably a cousin. That video in the slideshow, she said. That was yours, right? I nodded. She smiled. It was the only part that felt real. I sat still long after the slideshow loop ended. Not because I was waiting for someone to come up and congratulate me, or apologize, or explain. I stayed seated because, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to get up and prove I deserved to be in the room. That's when Amanda approached. She had that polished look common to Sable's friends: chiffon dress, manicured nails, the kind of necklace you can only wear if you're never worried about losing it. But her voice when she leaned in toward me was different, softer, sincere. "Wait, you're that Vesper Lane?" she asked. "The founder of Elder Guide?" I met her gaze and nodded. She didn't try to hide the way her breath caught. Her hand went to her chest, and tears started forming. Not dramatic, but honest. "That platform. My grandmother used it. After my grandfather passed, she was alone all the time. She called us every Sunday night. She even learned how to send emails. It made her feel like she still mattered." Amanda paused, swallowing hard. "She got to say goodbye to us before she passed, over video, because of what you built." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I just nodded again. For years, I'd worked for users like her grandma. For people I'd never meet, who'd been pushed to the side of a digital world moving too fast for them to keep up. I had hoped that what I built made a difference, but I hadn't expected to hear it like that. From someone close enough to Sable's orbit to wear matching bridesmaid shoes. Amanda took a deep breath and whispered, "Thank you. For her. For us." After a pause, I said quietly, "She mattered to me too, even if we never met." Amanda placed her hand on my arm, gave it a gentle squeeze, and stepped away. Behind her, the room had changed. People still talked, but their tones had shifted. Some conversations faded into murmurs. Others paused awkwardly when I passed by. At our family table, my mother still sat with her glass of wine untouched. She hadn't looked at me since Cassian's toast. Her expression was unreadable, stiff, like she hadn't decided yet how to respond. But she wasn't talking. For once, she wasn't filling the silence with redirection. That was new. She didn't congratulate me, didn't acknowledge me, but she didn't interrupt either. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't even fairness, but it was a crack, a visible shift in the wall she'd built so carefully over the years, the one that kept her version of the story intact. And that was enough. As the night wore on, and guests began pulling on jackets and thanking the hosts, I walked to the edge of the venue near the check-in desk where Amanda stood alone. She looked up and smiled again, this time lighter, less burdened. I pulled a small USB from my purse and handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked. "A personalized version of Elder Guide," I said. "Set up for the senior home where your grandmother stayed, lifetime access, everything pre-configured, no fees." Amanda blinked. "You didn't have to." "I know," I said. "That's why it matters." She looked like she might cry again, but instead she pulled me into a hug. A real one. No performance, no pretense. When we stepped apart, she asked, "Why are you giving this to me?" I shrugged gently. "Because you gave me credit, without knowing who I was. That kind of honesty means something." And it did. In a room full of curated perceptions and rehearsed images, she had responded to truth like it was instinct, not favor. I walked out of the venue without saying goodbye to my mother. Not because I wanted to make a scene, but because I didn't need to perform closure. Outside, the night air felt cool against my skin. The kind of cool that didn't sting, just woke you up. In the rideshare back home, I checked my phone. A new email had come through, a name I didn't recognize. Subject line: "Thank you from Plainsview Library." I opened it. Inside was a short note from a program director in Montana. They had just wrapped a pilot of Elder Guide in their small rural branch. One of the first users had been a 92-year-old veteran. He used the platform to FaceTime his great-granddaughter for the first time. "She thought I was gone," he said. "Now she knows I'm still here." I stared at the message, letting the words sink in. For so long, I had tried to explain that very thing to my own family, that I was still here, still building, still worthy. And now, someone else, someone they'd never meet, had said it for me. I didn't need a last name anymore, or their name on anything I'd made. I had my own, and it was reaching places they couldn't touch. 1 month later, I stood near the edge of the courtyard at Sable and Cassian's wedding, watching sunlight scatter across the surface of a pond lined with white rose petals. It was the kind of afternoon curated for perfection. Gold-rimmed chairs, jazz quartet tucked under an arch of eucalyptus. Even the breeze seemed coordinated. I wasn't in the bridal party. Not this time. Not ever. And I didn't want to be. My dress was soft navy, plain but elegant. Not the bridesmaid's shade, not a rebellion, just mine. Near the gift table was a row of printed programs, stacked neatly beside candles. I picked one up out of curiosity, already knowing I wouldn't find my name under family. I didn't need to. But tucked in the acknowledgments, between venue coordination and calligraphy by hand, was a single line. Technology support. Elder Guide Foundation. No asterisk. No footnote. It wasn't dramatic, but it was true, and that was enough. During the reception, while the couples danced and the photographer begged for candid smiles, I slipped away toward the garden's edge. The air was thick with laughter and cake crumbs. That's when I heard her voice behind me. I used to think your silence meant you were lost. I didn't turn around. I knew it was her. Marla moved to stand beside me, one arm crossed, the other cradling a glass of white wine. Now, she said, after a pause, I see it meant you were building something I didn't understand. I kept my eyes on the water, but I listened. She didn't offer an apology. She didn't cry or reach for a hug. That would have felt like performance. But she didn't talk over me this time. She didn't try to rewrite what had already been written. For once, she left a silence where my voice could live. And that was more than she'd ever given. We stood there for another minute, neither of us pretending to be close. But we weren't cold either. As dusk crept over the hills and lanterns flickered on, I nodded once and walked away. There was nothing left to fix. Nothing left to prove. 2 weeks later, I mailed a package. No logo, no card. Just a tailored version of Elder Guide, preloaded with accessibility features, personalized for the assisted living facility where Amanda's grandmother had spent her final years. Alongside it, I included a short, handwritten note on thick paper. Some connections outlive misunderstanding. Thank you for helping mine find her voice. There was no return address, no request for thanks. That was never the point. Back home in Portland, I cleared my kitchen table and taped a printed quote to the fridge. Not as a trophy, just as a compass. They'll call you a failure until they realize they were never the ones qualified to define you. The words didn't bite. They steadied. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and scrolled through Elder Guide's admin dashboard. A new notification blinked in the corner. New testimonial received, from Lincoln County, Oregon. The message was short. A user had reconnected with his son after 12 years of silence. He thought I didn't care anymore. Now he knows I never stopped. I didn't tear up. I didn't print it and tape it up. I just read it, let it land, and closed the tab. Because now I wasn't waiting for someone else to validate my story. I wasn't building for permission. I wasn't hiding receipts. I was simply living inside the life I had built. And finally, it felt like mine. Before we wrap up, I want to say this. Not as the woman they called a disappointment, but as someone who stopped waiting for them to get it. You don't need to be understood to be valuable. You don't need to be applauded to be effective. And you definitely don't need permission to matter. If you're walking through life feeling invisible in your own family, or you've been told you're too much or not enough, I hope you hear this clearly. You're not alone, and you're not broken. Sometimes the people closest to us are the last to see who we really are. That doesn't make you less. It just means your audience may be wider than your kitchen table. And that's okay. Build anyway, create anyway, love anyway. And when the time is right, let your work speak for itself. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been overlooked by your own family? Have you ever stayed quiet just to keep the peace? If this story hit home for you, drop a 1 in the comments, or tell me what part of the world you're watching from. If it didn't land for you, tell me why. I'm always open to learning from your stories too. And hey, if you found something real in this story, something that stirred something in you, don't forget to hit subscribe. There's so much more ahead. Stories that speak to the quiet battles, the brave beginnings, and the second chances we all deserve. Thanks for being here. Until next time, stay grounded, stay kind. And remember, your story isn't over yet.